Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now, your host, Tim Johnson.
Public K-12 education plays a critical role in Louisiana's economy. Educational attainment has improved in our state over the last few years, but there's much more work to be done. The Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, BESE, has constitutional responsibility for public education policy, including accountability and standards. Governor Jindal, State Superintendent John White, and BESE all agreed to adopt a set of national standards called Common Core. Now Governor Jindal wants the state to back away from these standards, and the issue has become highly political. We'll talk about the Common Core and the political and constitutional debate that has erupted when Chaz Roemer, chairman of BESE, joins us on the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
The Louisiana Business and Industry Show will be back right after this.
Founded in 1984, BIC Alliance and its subsidiaries connect business and industry buyers and suppliers with one another for the betterment of all. BIC helps companies grow in three ways: aggressive sales and marketing campaigns in BIC Magazine, finding the right people through BIC Recruiting, and by merger and acquisition and related services through IVS Investment Banking. Contact BIC Alliance today.
The funny thing about Louisiana is that people don't often ask you why you moved home. They just accept it as the most natural thing in the world. Because of course I would want to move back home and be near my tribe, be in this beautiful landscape. It just inspires me. Whether it's a golden marshland, an expanse of sugarcane fields, a sunset through a cypress swamp, the outdoors here really are like nowhere else. You can start your day off paddling at Lake Martin, finish it off with music at the Blue Moon. I came home for my dream job, but also because I believe in Louisiana and where it's going. We're building a world-class Central Park in Louisiana, planned by the members of this community. And I just bought my dream home, a sustainable house designed and built by the architecture students here at the university. My electricity bill was $30 last month. The life I thought I would have in Austin is actually happening right here in Louisiana. I'm E.B. Brooks. I have the job I want in the place I love.
At Peak Performance Physical Therapy, we treat the athlete in everyone, from the soccer star to the soccer mom. If your doctor prescribes physical therapy, ask for Peak Performance by name, getting you back in the game of life.
Insurance commercials have become unusually funny. We think that's strange because we take auto coverage pretty seriously at Louisiana Farm Bureau Insurance. Of course, when you cover as many vehicles in Louisiana as we do, it doesn't leave a lot of time for silly gimmicks. We're more concerned about what happens to you on the road than any chickens that happen to cross it just to make you chuckle. Louisiana Farm Bureau Insurance. Real service, real people.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show with Tim Johnson.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. I'm very pleased to be joined by Chaz Roemer. Chaz is the chairman of the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Chaz, welcome.
Glad to be here. I appreciate you having me.
I think that most of our viewers are familiar with what BESE is, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, but give us a quick overview of BESE, its structure, its mission, what's it intended to do?
Sure. There are 11 members to the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, 8 of whom are elected, 3 appointed by the governor. We have 3 main tasks. One is to hire the superintendent, state superintendent of education. We hired John White. The second is to provide a funding formula to the legislature on how to properly fund K-12 education in the state. And the third is we have the constitutional authority and responsibility to determine the policies that our state will enact in terms of assessments, in terms of testing, and in terms of standards. And so those are our main functions. We meet approximately 12 times a year. It's not a full-time job. Most of us have other jobs that we do full-time. but we meet approximately 12 times a year and operate in a committee system and a board system. And I've served now for 7 years and been president the last 2.
It really is the policy setting arm for public education in Louisiana, and obviously we're going to get into those constitutional responsibilities as we talk about this Common Core battle later in the show. But let's start with a big picture overview of the current state of public education in Louisiana. You were on the radio show a few weeks ago. You said we've made great strides. Sure. We talked about that in the show open, but there's more work to do, isn't there?
Well, there's still a lot of work to do. Let me talk about that side first. We still have 230,000 students out of approximately 700,000 students that are below grade level. And that's not acceptable.
Better than it was, but still not where you want it to be.
Better than it was, and we see signs of improvement. I'll give you some example. We had more students this year qualify with college-ready ACT scores than we've ever had in the history of our state. There was a time in our state where we didn't require students to take the ACT. And so you had students who never even really thought about going to college. Well, we made a policy decision as a board that we would require the ACT to be taken. And what's happened is we've had several thousand students who would not have even taken the ACT, who've now taken it, and they scored high enough to go to a 4-year college. We also just announced today, as a matter of fact, our AP test results, advanced placement. We had the highest percentage increase in the country of students who receive passing grades on AP exams of any state in America. Now, we achieved those things through higher standards, and that's something we're going to talk about later. But we have a lot of work to do in this state, but we're making progress.
And let's get to those standards, because you can't pick up the newspaper, you can't turn on the television without seeing this Common Core debate rage on. Obviously, the Common Core set of standards, we'll get into the background of that a little bit. Governor Jindal helped participated in a consortium of governors from around the country that helped develop these standards, made the decision to bring them to Louisiana. BESE said, yes, this is the right thing for us to do to be able to compete against the rest of the United States and quite frankly, against the rest of the world. But now the governor is starting to back away from that. So let's set it up by talking about what the Common Core is and the testing that's associated with it.
Well, you used a key word there on what Common Core really is. You use the word competition, okay? And what Common Core really is a higher set of standards that we certainly need in our state, and I would argue we need in our country. Louisiana on most barometers ranks near the bottom in terms of English language arts and math outcomes. Unfortunately, the United States ranks somewhere 17, 18, or 19 in the world now in terms of math and language outcomes. So, there was a general sense around the country that if we wanted to remain competitive and if we wanted to remain the economic leader of the world, that we needed to make sure our workforce was the most highly trained and highly capable workforce in the world. And so a group of governors actually got together and said that this is what we ought to do. That we all agree that we can do better. We all agree that higher standards lead to better outcomes. And so they agreed to work together on what those standards should be. Louisiana participated in that process. We had people that sat on the board, we had people that sat on the committees that helped determine what those standards should be. And so we were an active participant with the governor's support and endorsement for doing so. But all it really is, Common Core, is a set of standards on what we think a student should learn by grade level in terms of English language arts and in terms of math. It's not a federal curriculum. It's not mandated by the feds. We don't get money because of it. It's a decision that we made as a state. Our state adopted these standards, and here's what we want our state, the message we want to send to the rest of the country, is that if you come to Louisiana to start a company, if you come to Louisiana to start an industry, if you come to Louisiana, you will find the most skilled, trained workforce as any place in America. And the way we decided to do that is to participate in Common Core standards and say we're willing to compete.
And I think that is a critical point that is oftentimes missed. We got a little less than 2 minutes left in this segment, and I want to touch on this, that competition aspect. What we saw previous to the implementation was a situation where a kid might finish the 5th or 6th grade in Louisiana. His family moved to, say, Michigan or to Virginia or to Massachusetts. And that kid would be as much as a full grade level behind his peers. And it's very difficult for us to compete when our young people are learning a year or in some cases 2 years behind what kids in other states are doing. And so the Common Core in this set of standards really is intended to level that playing field and help us compete, but most importantly to help us understand what we need to do to compete with the rest of the United States.
Absolutely. You know, our students who may have moved to North Carolina or Virginia that are behind us, not because they're not as smart, it's because our standards were lower. You know, we have LEAP tests and things in place now. Unfortunately, those standards are lower than what we need them to be in order to be competitive. And I'd also say, you know, for our students moving away, the same as if you want to move to our state. If you're a CEO of a company and you want to move to our state, one of the things that's first and foremost on your mind are my workers' children going to be able to get a good education in Louisiana?
And that really is the key. And so we level the playing field. We're not adopting national curriculum. We're adopting standards that say, here's what a kid ought to know when he finishes the 5th grade, and it's more uniform so we know we're competing. We're going to take a break. We come back, we got a lot more to talk about. We're visiting with Chaz Roemer. He is the chairman of the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.
The Louisiana Business and Industry Show will be back right after this.
BIC Media Solutions is a marketing and communication, media advisory, and event planning company within BIC Alliance. BIC Media Solutions offers custom book publishing, event planning, and keynote speaking to its clients in the business and industrial sector, and marketing partnerships to others in publishing. BIC Alliance is your business and industry connection. Contact BIC Alliance today.
At Peak Performance Physical Therapy, we treat the athlete in everyone, from the Grand Slam hitter to grandparents. If your doctor prescribes physical therapy, ask for Peak Performance by name, getting you back in the game of life.
Hello, I'm Eric Edwards with the Livingston Parish Convention and Visitors Bureau. Find out now what's going on in Livingston Parish. We have over 400 nautical miles of waterways. Tee it up at our great world-renowned golf courses. Shop at our antique districts, or come to Bass Pro, our #1 retailer. There's a lot to do in Livingston Parish that you never imagined. It's all happening right here in Livingston Parish. For more information, go online at visitlivingstonparish.com.
At Peak Performance Physical Therapy, we treat the athlete in everyone, from the three-point shooter to the three-piece suit. If your doctor prescribes physical therapy, ask for Peak Performance by name, getting you back in the game of life.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show with Tim Johnson.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. We're visiting with Chaz Roemer, chairman of BESE, the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. So we set up Common Core in the last segment. Not a national curriculum, but a set of standards that allows us to clearly measure and compete against the rest of the United States. But there has been a very vocal, I suspect, minority of people out there who have been opposed to these standards for a number of different reasons. And we've heard a lot of reasons why they don't think the Common Core is the right direction. What do you believe, in your own personal opinion, is most misunderstood about the Common Core?
You know, probably the most misunderstood thing is the idea that it's a federal curriculum and a federal takeover of our schools. You know, I would make this point. One, is not a federal program, okay? This was, again, a group of states that came together and states that participated in development of the standards. But the second point I'd make is changes we've made at BESE over the last few years. You know, we give more freedom to local schools and local districts and individual teachers than we've ever given them on ideas of what texts are you going to use to teach your students, what examples are you going to use to teach your students. You know, Common Core is a set of standards. It's a goal of where we want you to get your students. But how you get there is up to you.
And it's up to those local districts,
absolutely. Right? And we give them more freedom than we've ever given them while we simultaneously agree to higher standards. So that's probably the most misunderstood thing.
We want to set the standards and hold them accountable for higher standards. But think about what you just said, Chaz. We don't want the federal government telling us how to educate our children. But you guys have even taken it a step farther than that. You're saying that the state's not even going to tell you what curriculum in most cases you ought to be using. That is a local decision. And that really doesn't change with the implementation of Common Core, does it?
I mean, not at all. In fact, our state, we probably went too far. We were very aggressive at deregulating education in this state over the last few years. You know, there was a time when, you know, you had to go turn to the state to find out what page you should be on Wednesday. And we changed that completely. And we actually got away with giving locals their curriculum. Now, we actually probably went too far because a lot of local districts, especially your more rural districts, weren't quite ready for that full responsibility. So we've had to come back and give them guidance as to what their curriculum can look like. Not has to look like, but it can look like. And that doesn't change at all under Common Core.
And I do hear a lot of that. I'll tell you something else that I've heard. And I heard this from a guy that I respect immensely and who has been a friend of mine for years, but who happens to be on the other side of this debate. He said, as I know you have heard, hundreds of rumors about what will happen if Common Core is fully implemented in Louisiana. And by the way, it's on its way to be fully implemented. We've been working on it for 3 years. But he said one of the things that's going to happen is the feds are going to outlaw homeschooling if the Common Core becomes the law of Louisiana. We hear things like that seem to be on the fringe. Yeah. What's your response to those kind of issues?
Well, that's not going to happen in Louisiana. I mean, we're more supportive of alternatives to traditional education than any state in America. And under this BESE board, we've done that. We have more charter schools than we've ever had before. We've done scholarships, and we support homeschooling completely. And participating in Common Core is not going to change that.
You guys have made a point to say that if in fact it ever looks like there is federal intervention in terms of setting curriculum and management of our schools, that you will withdraw completely from any set of, I mean,
Absolutely.
BESE has had that conversation.
I wouldn't support that.
Yeah.
I mean, the original Race to the Top grant, the very first one, going way back, was different than what we're doing now. And that was very much tied to a federal mandate. And I didn't agree with that. I voted against that first step because that's what it was. This is completely separate. And I would not in any way support the idea of the federal government taking over our local schools. Now, I would make an important point, though. You know, we do receive billions of dollars from the federal government.
Right.
And a lot of that goes into K-12 education. Now, do people want to send that money back too? Now, that's just a way of saying, look, whether we like it or not, the feds are involved in state budget issues. But in terms of our curriculum, I would never give up our right to determine what we're going to do in this state to the federal government.
Louisiana school districts, Louisiana principals, Louisiana teachers, Louisiana parents decide what is ultimately taught in Louisiana schools. Now, this whole thing has become, unfortunately, pretty transparently political. The governor was all for the Common Core at the beginning. We saw some far right-wing, maybe presidential primary voters come out and say we don't like it. And the governor now has done a 180. Two questions there. In your opinion, what happened, number one? And number two, what does this change and all this turmoil mean for principals, for school districts, for students, for teachers, and I guess most importantly for students, right?
Yeah. Well, let's take your first question first. What happened? You know, there was a period of time where there was a vacuum, in my opinion, of leadership on this issue. And we allowed rumors to become the truth. I don't blame people for the rumors. They weren't certain what the answers were, and they were hearing rumors, and next thing you know, the rumors become true. And quite frankly, if we would have had a little bit of leadership at that point from the governor and from others to say, no, this is a standard that Louisiana is going to adopt, and we have the ability to do what we want to do within these standards. But we didn't do that, and the politics became louder and louder, and unfortunately, the governor, I think, has paid attention to that politics to the detriment of our policy, a policy that he previously supported. The second issue, I would tell all teachers and all districts in this state, and I think this is what they're doing, they need to proceed with the Common Core. That is the law of this state. You know, we got here because the legislature supported this and passed laws, and the BESE board did the same. And the
legislature reaffirmed its support during the last legislative session.
Absolutely. They had many chances to turn the clock, as did BESE, and neither of us chose to do so. And we are constitutionally the bodies that make that decision.
Well, and that's the question I want to get to next, because unfortunately we've reached the position now where lawsuits are flying around. There's litigation, and a lot of it hinges on the constitutional responsibility of BESE. And that's what I want to get get into when we come back.
Good.
We're visiting with Chaz Roemer. He's the chairman of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in Louisiana, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.
The Louisiana Business and Industry Show will be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Joe Martin, president of ITI Technical College. Do you want a better life?
Get your associate's degree in occupational studies in information technology from ITI. In 2 years, you'll be on your way to a better life. You will get hands-on specialized training in computers, hardware and software, networking, and more. ITI offers flexible class schedules, and financial aid is available to those who qualify.
So don't wait. Call ITI now or go online. It's that simple.
ITI for a better life.
The funny thing about Louisiana is that people don't often ask you why you moved home. They just accept it as the most natural thing in the world. Because of course I would want to move back home and be near my tribe, be in this beautiful landscape. It just inspires me. Whether it's a golden marshland, an expanse of sugarcane fields, a sunset through a cypress swamp, the outdoors here really are like nowhere else. You can start your day off paddling at Lake Martin, finish it off with music at the Blue Moon. I came home for my dream job, but also because I believe in Louisiana and where it's going. We're building a world-class Central Park in Louisiana, planned by the members of this community. And I just bought my dream home, a sustainable house designed and built by the architecture students here at the university. My electricity bill was $30 last month. The life I thought I would have in Austin is actually happening right here in Louisiana. I'm E.B. Brooks. I have the job I want in the place I love.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show with Tim Johnson.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. We're having a really good conversation with Chaz Roemer, who is the chairman of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, BESE. And Chaz, we talked about this debate relative to Common Core. It really has become, in my words, transparently political, and that's unfortunate, particularly for the students of our state. You mentioned in the last segment as we were closing that it is the constitutional responsibility of BESE to set policy. There's litigation involved now. I think the administration suing BESE, BESE suing the administration, there are parents involved, there are other groups. But the litigation really hinges on your constitutional right to set policy, or your constitutional responsibility to set policy for K-12 education. So let's talk about what this litigation looks like and this whole discussion around BESE's responsibility.
Sure. Well, let me make a couple basic points. I mean, you do need to go back to understand the constitutional issue. You need to understand how we got here. You know, we've been on this path for 4 years with the support of the governor, the support of the legislature, and support of BESE. And during that 4 years, we've had a great deal of debate over Common Core. The legislature's had many opportunities to turn back and say we don't want to do Common Core. Even in this last session, they had that opportunity and they did not turn back, nor did BESE. And what's happened since they've left town, the governor has unilaterally made decisions to try to stop Common Core. They can make arguments about what they're really doing, but they're trying to stop Common Core in this state. And we have argued that that's unconstitutional, that he can't use procurement policies and some backroom committee that we've never elected to determine education policies in this state. That's not what the Constitution intended, and that's not what we're going to support.
It is clearly BESE's responsibility.
Absolutely. Now, I assume the courts are going to have to weigh in on that issue. Now, we did not file the first lawsuit here. I want to be clear. We don't look to litigate. I'm not excited about being in the courtroom. We gave the governor several different options that we thought solved his problems.
In the spirit of compromise, quite
Absolutely.
frankly, right?
In the spirit of compromise. And we were dismissed out of hand. And there was another group of parents and teachers who did file a suit saying that the governor has taken unconstitutional steps here that's harming their ability to educate their own students and their own kids.
And I think I read where you said is that we don't necessarily want to be involved in this litigation, as you just mentioned, but if your constitutional responsibility is going to be debated in a court of law, BESE ought to be there, right?
Absolutely. Look, no one on BESE was excited about the idea of suing the governor or the commissioner of administration. That's not what we wanted. We wanted to find a resolution because it's important to educate our kids, and we need to get on with that. But this suit was filed, and they're going to be arguing about the constitutional authority of BESE. And if they're going to be arguing about that in court, we need to have a seat at the table.
And you will. And now, as I understand it, there's a preliminary hearing set for August 18th or somewhere around there. So what do you expect will happen as we go through the litigation?
Well, specifically, what I hope is going to happen on the 18th is the Commissioner of Administration and the Governor suspended a contract that was in place. And it was a contract to deliver tests to our students. And they suspended that contract, saying that they would not allow that contract to deliver a test that was aligned to Common Core.
And let me interject there, because I know enough about testing and standardized testing to know that you don't just run out and develop new tests, right? They've got to be psychometrically approved, they've got to be validated. There's a lot that goes into testing, and so you can't say, well, we're not going to do this, let's just go do this, particularly within a couple of weeks of the start of school.
Well, and it's also, let's be clear, it's not a low bid process. You know, we're not buying a widget. You know, if we're buying a widget, let's get the least expensive widget we could find. We're buying the best test to find out what our children and our students are learning. And I don't think what the governor's done is he's trying to use the procurement policy to determine the content of our test. Well, that's not the purpose of the procurement policy. That's also not what the Constitution intended.
And we don't want individuals who are specialists in procurement making decisions about the content of educational tests, which is critical. Now, we got a little bit less than 2 minutes left, so I want to hit on 2 points quickly. First is, what's your message to the business community in Louisiana? What do they need to do to support you if they believe that higher standards are what Louisiana needs?
Well, I think the business community has a great voice to play here. In simple things like making it clear that they want our students and our workforce to be the most highly trained, most capable workforce and students in America. And that we want our workforce to compete with any workforce in any state. That helps our businesses. If they just did that message alone, that would help us a great deal.
30 seconds, look into your crystal ball. Where does all this end?
Well, it's going to end up with we're going to keep high standards in this state. Look, I'm committed to it. Our state is near the bottom. And if we're going to compete with the rest of the world, we need to be ready to compete. And we're going to do that by a very simple idea. We're going to put the highest standards in place of any state in any country in America or the world.
And we're going to give our children a chance to compete on that global stage in a global economy, and we're going to measure them so that we know we're doing the right things. Chaz Roemer, appreciate it. Good job today, man. Thanks for being with us. Keep fighting the fight. We're going to bring you back soon to see where all of this is headed. That's a wrap, guys. We appreciate you joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.